If you look at the economy, without integrity, how can it survive and work? If you look at relationships, do you want relationships without integrity? Not likely. And if you're a religious person, you certainly expect integrity in the religion you're a part of. So wherever you look, the foundation of all these major things is integrity. It's assumed, but without it, they don't survive.
Today we are being joined by a special guest today, Bill Pipke. This is for the Learn Online Security podcast. Thank you for joining us. And how are you doing, Bill?
I'm delighted to be here.
Well, it's wonderful having you.
Thank you.
So you are an author.
Well, I wrote a book called Integrity, the Best Foundation. It's in 3 different languages now. So we're sort of an author.
Well, you know what? You write a book. I think that makes you an author. So Bill, your book is about integrity. Can you tell me a little bit about why you decided to write this book?
Well, if you stop and think about it, the foundation of democracy is integrity. Take that away, and democracy begins to crumble. If you look at the economy, without integrity, how can it survive and work? If you look at relationships, do you want relationships without integrity? Not likely. And if you're a religious person, you certainly expect integrity in the religion you're a part of. So wherever you look, the foundation of all these major things is integrity. It's assumed, but without it, they don't survive.
You know, I think about that a lot. Just operating in any business. I've got some of my own businesses that I operate in. And still to this day, handshake deals, right? Like we do that. We make agreements, verbal agreements. And without that, you really can't operate your business, I would say, for most people.
Well, if you're depending on a written contract and you have to read all of the small print, there's not a good feeling. There needs to be this sense of, I can trust you. Trust is the currency of integrity. So without trust, integrity begins to crumble. So what you have already told us is that you innately understand how integrity works. I need you to trust me as I provide a service, and you need me to be able to trust you as you come to me as a client.
Yeah, I think that's very fair to say. And as you said as well, in relationships, right? So relationships of all kinds, whether it's family, whether it's friendship, business relationships. How else does that impact us?
Well, integrity is part of every aspect of our life. And, it doesn't matter whether you look at the young, the old, you look at people who are really very successful and they're very engaged, or people who have maybe not been quite so successful, but measure their integrity component and you'll know a lot about them.
Okay, so that would bring me to my next question. How would one measure someone else's integrity or their own?
That's a great question. And I didn't coach you on this because that's what our book is all about. I go into a lot of businesses and I'll see up on their value statement, integrity. So I'll say to the owners, so how do you measure that? And they get this glassy-eyed look. Well, it's kind of like motherhood. You have it or you don't. We don't think that's true. We think that's an emotion that people rely on, but integrity can be measured. And there are pillars of integrity that tell us whether or not a person has integrity. Now, integrity is doing what you ought to do, even if it costs you. It's not just doing what you should do when no one's looking. It's doing what you ought to do, even with it cost you, which takes you a lot deeper than the first definition. So we have 6 things that we talk about in the book that help us to measure a person's integrity and to know whether they are growing in integrity, stagnant, or decreasing.
So that's interesting. So, because I would have never really thought about it that way, that integrity is fluid, actually, right? Like we assume that when you learn integrity, so say you're a small child and you're taught not to lie or not to steal, or for example, right?
Sure. When I was a kid, I had stay out of trouble integrity, because I was afraid
Of
of
course.
the consequences.
Yes.
I didn't have the character but I knew the consequences, so I'd stay out of trouble. Integrity. Lowest level of integrity comes when I just fear the consequences. It means I don't have the character.
And I mean, as far as society operates, we do operate in that base. That's with law, right? Law and order and punishment and, right, court and jail time and all of that is for.
The
Fines.
assumption is deterrents are adequate to cause us to have integrity. I think we all know that people calculate that. And sometimes you'd say, I'd much rather take the risk.
Mm-hmm.
And so they really don't have integrity. What they have is calculated behavior.
And that probably goes very much hand in hand with calculated risk, right? Because different people have different levels of risk.
Right.
Right. So then tell me a little bit more about how your book, how you've used your book to teach others.
Well, we're all across Africa. We're in a number of countries. We teach both children and adults. And with the children, we teach it in a slightly different way. We use children's language and children's metaphors, but we teach the same 6 things that are the measurements of integrity. And then with adults, we use the book, but we also teach summits. We have online information. We do everything we can to take people from information, which this is what integrity looks like, to application. This is how we actually live with integrity, because we think the I of information leads to the A of application, which, if it happens, will result in transformation. And people will actually be people of integrity, which is our goal.
And so getting people to listen, of course, is the beginning, is what you're saying, but then actually to apply it. So how long do you think that takes, or from your experience?
Well, it all begins when they come and say, I want to read the book, or I want to come to the summit. That's the beginning. And for every person, it's different. But we recognize that integrity generally is not a solo sport. It's a team sport, in the sense that if we have accountability partners, if we have people who are encouraging us, if we have people we're learning with, it's like going to the gym. You can do it by yourself. But generally, people struggle with that. But if you have a friend and you have things that encourage the gym experience, all that exercise, which you want to do, becomes even more successful in terms of your behavior. And we've discovered that there are people who think, well, integrity is just something I'm going to do myself. I'm going to keep it all to myself. The dangers in that is that they miss out the great encouragement that friends can give, accountability can give. If I tell you that I'm going to do something and say, hey, will you check up on me? And I know you're going to ask me, guess what I'm likely to do?
Well, you're more likely to act.
Exactly. So you see, there is more than just, I'm going to be a person of integrity that comes into this. How many people have discovered that willpower alone is not enough? 15% of people have enough willpower to pull it off.
Well, I think about like New Year's resolutions, for example. Like, it's the first thing that comes to my mind, right? How many of us are like, okay, it's a new year. I've done this, and this maybe poorly last year, and I want to change things. And you have the best of intentions. And you don't usually stay on the bandwagon all that long, even though you try. And you do try, but you get busy and you get distracted. So this is a way for you to stay on task. So then my next question would be, do you find that with integrity, that when you act and you I'm not going to say portray yourself, if you act in integrity, that you attract people that have integrity?
It's true. We say about corruption that it has an immediate payoff, but it decreases the longer you live in corruption. And so it's a diminishing return. With integrity, the problem for most is it begins with just a small amount of return. But the longer you live with integrity, the more it compounds and grows. And so the result of living with integrity includes the benefits of people trusting you. You're having stronger relationships. You're not having to remember what you told someone because, you don't have to have a good memory if you tell the truth. There's all kinds of benefits that come. And typically, integrity is magnetic. It's charismatic. What are people looking for in leaders? Integrity. What are people wanting in their persons that they want to hang out with? Integrity. What do they want with people they're playing games with?
Mm-hmm.
Integrity.
Sports.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see how that would work. So then when it comes to learnonlinesecurity.com,
Mm-hmm.
and to tie it back to this, what do you see when you look at the internet and the world kind of at large that operates online?
Well, I don't want to sound as though I'm negative or critical and I don't see anything good. There's a lot of really good stuff out there. Mm-hmm. And there are some people who are acting with great integrity and they're arising and they're emerging mm-hmm. as organizations. If you watch, what are the ones that are really thriving? Typically, the growing curve includes integrity or a hard effort to have it. The ones that are declining, they don't make the top 500 next year. They're probably looking to that. Part of the undermining has been a lack of integrity in a number of contracts or relationships. I generally see that people are wanting to say they have integrity. Many times they're not sure. How do I have it? How do I measure it? How can I take my organization to be an organization with high reputation where people, when they think of us, they'll smile because they've had a good experience, not only in service, but in the honesty and in the dignity and in the influence we had in their lives. So, yeah, as I look at the internet and what's happening there, I see a lot of over-promising and under-delivering as you have. But I'm looking for those ones who are integrous and they actually stand out.
So something interesting Richard had said previously about how the internet, the focus had really shifted when we had talked about the last, say, 2 to 5 years, that it has gone to a very, I'm going to put it in my own words, like an I am society, self-driven, they want to make, 5 figures, 6 figures, 7 figures. And it's about making money and it's about being seen. And I want to kind of bring that back to integrity. So when it comes to integrity, and just in my mind, integrity isn't usually just self-driven. Is that accurate?
Well, if you're looking for instant gratification, integrity is not likely to be your answer. Corruption likely is, because it offers an instant hit. But what integrity offers is the long-term big audience. And so, with integrity, for instance, if influence is something you want, integrity says you use your influence for the good of everyone, not just yourself. Think of politicians, business leaders who have only thought of themselves. What was the outcome? Corruption, the demise of an organization. So what integrity says is, I use my influence for the good of everyone. And when I do that, suddenly that affects how I'm going to go on the internet.
That sounds like a really great place to start for sure.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say if somebody wanted advice on where to start with integrity?
Well, they can start by determining that they're willing to look into the 6 pillars of integrity and learn to ask the questions every day that help them to measure how I'm doing and what decisions am I making. Are they integrous? And when you learn those simple tools, you can begin to implement a lifestyle of integrity. And you can choose to go from the level you're at right now and increase and grow. And the rewards, the sense of dignity, the sense of being authentic, will begin to be high motivation for the people who are willing to step up and say, okay, I'm going to try this.
Here's an example. So someone who struggles with confidence, say, how does integrity impact their growth in that aspect?
Beautiful question. One of the 6 pillars of integrity is dignity. Dignity tells me I have a purpose and that I need to be, for Bill Pipke, I may not be the most handsome person or the smartest, most I don't have the most money, but I can be the best Bill Pipke I can be. I was created with a purpose. And if I know what that is, then I can begin to live up to my potential. And to think that I am actually being the best Bill Pipke that I'm capable of being is very gratifying. And so we teach everyone that no matter who you are, you have dignity. And so that relates to every age, every gender. It relates to whether you have a lot of money or you don't have money. It relates to all of life. Some people say, well, what about me? I struggle with, and I think it's still okay to use the term handicap. Do I still have the same dignity? We believe you do. And that, some of the finest people we know are leaders who they struggle with some things that are challenges, but they have a great dignity, and that dignity takes them to their potential.
And I like the idea that it's a growth, and it's incremental. It's not like you start here and you have to be up here, with maybe somebody that you esteem very highly and you would like to be like them. It's a process to get there. It's very encouraging.
Confession time. I don't have it all together, and I teach it. I'm still growing. I think I'm better this year, though. And I've learned to ask the questions, and I ask them more repetitively. And I'm happier with my answers, and I'm happier with my heart in the answers. But I'm still growing. And there's some areas that I didn't do well. But there's some areas I'm working on. So if we make integrity a one-off and I've got it, then you're really not interested in my book, because I'm talking about helping people reach their highest potential. And what you can be in 2025, 2026 can be incrementally better.
And so I'm assuming that you have not just yourself, but you also have people that you have followed or you're connected to, and you've been able to see this growth firsthand. Do you have like a story or an example of some things that you've seen and just how their life has been, encouraged or blessed or bettered?
Well, I have some remarkable stories, just incredible things from all over that come to us, and we're so glad to get these stories. But I think of which is the one to tell first, think of a university professor who was working in a brand new university, and there's pressure to produce quality marks in the people in his department. And not everyone was measuring up to the standards that were being required by the administration. And he couldn't, by marking on a curve or whatever, legitimately say that these who were graduating had reached the level that they should. And the president came and said, either you say yes, or you can be looking elsewhere. And so he couldn't. And so he didn't give those grades. Somebody else did, and the students went on. And he was without work for a full year and a few months. And then he got a call from the best university in the nation. And they said, we are interested in interviewing you for a position as the dean of this department. And he said to them, why? They said, well, we have heard your story. And he is now the dean of that department, and he's leading in that excellent university. And by the way, the other university didn't make it. And he would have been out of a job anyway.
Wow, that's pretty neat, because you think someone like a professor, and I think it's an interesting story, someone like a professor would be someone that you think, like, okay, this guy has it all together. Like, he's like in the prime of his life, and he's
smart.
He's smart. He's got it all going on, And then something like this happens where he literally has to question what he's doing and if he's even going to have a job by making that decision. I think that's a really good example of, man, like, that's a hard choice to make, the right choice, but a hard choice.
And he had to determine, why am I teaching, and what do I want from my students? Who will be the ones who come out of my classes that are going to serve this nation and are going to make a difference in business or the culture? He saw way beyond a paycheck. If you're living for cash, that's probably a poor way to live. But when you have bigger issues of why you're living, things like integrity or changing a culture, building great people. That's pretty rewarding.
If you would like to get a copy of Bill Pipke's book, Integrity, the Best Foundation, you can click on the link below. We look forward to you joining us for the member-only portion called Heroes for learnonlinesecurity.com. You can click the link below.